Awesome. Welcome, everyone. It's Friday, November 7th. My name is Abba Kaiser. I am with Organic Seed Alliance as the Assistant Director of Outreach. And we're so excited for our last quarterly call of the season. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again to start this slideshow. We're so excited to see all the faces here and really excited about this call. We have Masha Vernik and Shelby Mandonado with us today as guest speakers. The quarterly calls are a new initiative from Organic Seed Alliance this year. We really hope to continue them in 2026, hopefully with a new and improved time. So be on the lookout for that. But these are opportunities for us to touch base with you all throughout the year beyond our summits and our workshops and the conference to talk about the good work that you're doing throughout the nation and throughout the world, really. We're really excited that you're here. And our quarterly calls this past year have encompassed things from participatory plant breeding to advocacy efforts and the National Plant Germplasm System. We're really excited today to be focusing on how farmers are responding to climate shifts through seed. We also have another opportunity to connect with our team, which is our advocacy office hour. Our last one of the year is going to be December 5th, and this is a chance for you to connect directly with the policy work that OSA is engaged in. And I'm really thrilled to announce that Cathleen McCluskey, who is our former policy and advocacy director, is now actually our new executive director, which we're thrilled to announce. We will put out the word yesterday. So we'll hear a little bit from her with a policy corner as part of this call in just a moment. But we wanted to just welcome you to the call. We did a little debrief of kind of why we're here, what these are all about. These are being recorded. Any resources that you share in the chat pertaining to today's topic or any other events that you want to share that you have going on, we will amass those and then share those out on our website with the recording. So there will be a record of everything. And we're going to hear from Kat in just a minute with some policy corner updates, as I mentioned, and then we'll get into our presentation for the bulk of the call. We will go into breakout rooms for regional discussions around the specific topic areas and how climate change is impacting you and where you see yourself in the seed system. We'll come back and do a little debrief and an open share for initiatives and announcement times and further discussion. So with that, I'd love to have a volunteer help me read our community agreements for holding the space that we like to keep here at OSA. Maybe one of my OSA team members here could pop in here.
Yeah, I can go.
Thanks,
everybody.
Michael.
So we all have a role tending this space. During this event, we agree to speak for ourselves and make space for others, be as present as possible, be aware of who is missing in each conversation. Remember that no one has a monopoly on truth and everyone's experience is valid. Critique ideas, not people. Listen to our bodies and tend to their needs. Give some grace for technical and logistical difficulties and aim for connection, not perfection.
Thanks, Michael. We want to give the question in the chat over to you all to introduce yourselves and if you would like to share where you're tuning in from. And the question prompts are around what your role is in the seed system. And specifically, are there any climactic concerns that make producing high quality seeds challenging for you? And what helps you cope with climate change? So just small questions. If you want to just respond to one of those, that's totally fine. But just feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. And let folks know kind of how you're plugging into the conversation today. What feels resonant and alive to you, or why did you join? Specific to the topic of how climate change is affecting the seed system. And we also have this poll that I'm going to launch as well. So sorry to double ask of you guys. I should have maybe thought this through a little bit more, but we're going to launch this welcome poll just to get a sense of, you know what, I'm going to skip this. I'm going to skip this. I feel like we got the chat buzzing. We can just focus on the chat. It's mostly around kind of where do you plug into the seed system? So we're going to skip that one. I'm going to pass it over to Cathleen McCluskey, who's going to be talking a little bit about our policy and advocacy work. But I just also want to say welcome, Kat, as our new executive director for Organic Seed Alliance. And I can't even tell you how excited we are as a team to have you at the helm. And I'm so excited for those of you on the call who are hearing for the first time to welcome you in your new role, which has been a long time coming. So welcome, Kat.
Thank you so much, Abba. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, it is a deep honor, and I'm really excited to be appointed the executive director. That is fresh news as of this week. And yeah, more on that, of course, to come, hopefully much more. But this morning, I'm going to share a little bit about OSA's advocacy program briefly and just give a few advocacy updates. As you might imagine, with the government being in shutdown, our updates are a little sparser and happening a little bit more behind the scenes, and some organizing through our coalition work, a little more than usual. And so, yeah, just briefly, OSA's policy and advocacy program has really evolved over time. OSA was launched about 23 years ago, and it wasn't until after a couple of years of working with growers and developing our participatory methods in our research program did we launch a federal advocacy program, which stands today based and rooted in participatory policy methodology. We conduct legal and cultural advocacy for policies that support organic ag and farmers' rights to save seed. This includes our work with the National Organic Program, specifically through the National Organic Standards Board, which I was elected to in January of 2025 by the former administration, as well as working on our State of Organic Seed project, which I'll talk a little bit more about here in a moment. But our aim, as you can see on this slide that I'm sharing here, is to ensure growers' perpetual rights to seed cultivation, all while fostering equity and community involvement. We do most of our federal policy work through coalition. I see several coalition members on the call today, so good to see you all as usual. Abba, can I get the next slide, please? Thanks. So I just want to touch briefly on this participatory policy and the development of our policy platform for seed. You can find that on our website. It is the only federal policy platform focused solely on organic seed in the U.S. We have developed this platform with close engagement with seed communities and seed advocates and stewards from across the U.S., as well as pulling surveys from constituents in our database, informed also in part by our survey data from the State of Organic Seed project, or party data, as my slide says, but I mean, State of Organic Seed could be considered a party, as well as listening sessions that we conducted and consulting with organizations and policy coalition partners across the US. So you can check out our policy platform for seed on our website, as I mentioned, under our resource section. Ava, can I get the next slide, please? So just briefly, I want to share with folks who've been following along with the National Organic Standards Board work. OSA has been quite loud about this because of the two very seed-related issues on the National Organic Standards Board working agenda right now. The NOSB, for folks that might be a little bit newer to learning about the program, is a group of federally appointed members who inform the National Organic Program as to the best way to manage the program and quality standards within the organic seal. And related to seed right now, the NOSB's work agenda includes consistency in organic seed usage, as well as induced mutagenesis, but also just excluded methods on a whole. So I just popped this slide in here because I think it's useful for folks to know what the standing organic seed rule is for the National Organic Program. And that is that organic producers are generally required to use organic seed. However, if an equivalent organically produced variety is not commercially available to them, growers are able to use conventional non-treated seed. So that's non-GE technology and untreated conventional seed. Can I get the next slide, please, Abba? So right now, the National Organic Standards Board and the National Organic Program is considering how to improve consistency in organic seed usage. So looking at this allowance that I just mentioned, there is a discussion document that we released, we being National Organic Standards Board, earlier this autumn. The board is not convening during the government shutdown. There was our autumn meeting that is one of 2 meetings that happens publicly each year for the board, was canceled due to the shutdown because we didn't have, of course, a National Organic Program staff to support and lead that meeting. So these 2 discussion documents that I meant, that this and the next one that I'll mention, are sort of on hiatus. We did have a public comment period on these issues and all of the National Organic Standards Board issues that was happening while the government was still open. However, the board has not read or been delivered those public comments yet due to the shutdown. But I do think it's important for folks to know that these are active discussions and active data gathering points right now for the board. So as I mentioned, this consistency in organic seed usage, the board has a discussion document out that we've been working with community members and hearing from folks across the board on addressing that loophole as it stands. And then Abba, can I get the next slide too, please? Thank you. The other discussion document that is live and was released prior to this meeting prior to the canceled meeting, it was on excluded methods, in particular induced mutagenesis. I won't go into the details of what that methodology is, but it is one method on a long list of to be determined excluded methods. So whether or not that should or should not be allowable in the National Organic Program, the board put out a discussion document, one particularly for induced mutagenesis, but also on the sort of method that the board is proposing to consider whether it should not, or should, with some contingencies, be allowed in production, and potentially to apply that methodology to the rest of the TBD list. Thanks, Abba. Can I get one more slide, please? Thank you. And I do want to just share with folks who might be newer to OSA's advocacy and research work in particular about our State of Organic Seed project. State of Organic Seed is an ongoing project of OSA's where we monitor organic seed systems across the U.S. And every 5 years, we release a project report as well as a roadmap based on and driven from our findings. The methods that we use to gather data to inform this report are farmer surveys, certifier surveys, a survey for seed producers and seed companies, a researcher survey, as well as conducting interviews with folks within each of these categories. So you can find all of the State of Organic Seed reports that we've released, and that's 2011, 2016, 2022 is our most recent report. And you can find all those I can drop the website link in there, but on OSA's website. And I want to flag for folks that we are about to launch our next set of surveys for data gathering. That will be happening imminently, hopefully here in Q4. And the first one will be for organic farmers. And I know that was quite a lot, but I know we have quite a bit more to talk about today. So I'll leave all of that as my brief update and turn it back over to Abba.
Awesome. Thanks, Kat. And I'm going to welcome our amazing speakers today. And if anybody has questions for Kat, I'm sure she'll post her contact info in the chat if you want to plug in with any of the awesome advocacy efforts that are going on through OSA or the State of Organic Seed. I know we have a lot of international folks in the house. I just read through the chat and just so grateful you all could join us. So we're looking forward to learning from you as well. But I'm going to go ahead and introduce our speakers, starting with Masha Vernik. So I'm going to go ahead and unshare and let Masha get in here and share screen while I do a little intro. So Masha, I got connected with Masha through her work, her dissertation, that she had worked a little bit with Kat and Jared, who's also on the call here at OSA, to conceptualize. And Masha's with the University of Washington School of Environmental and Forest Sciences, as well as the Jewish Seed Project. So if it's okay, Masha, I'm going to do just a little intro using your bio. Is that all right? All right. So Masha is a PhD student at the University of Washington, as I mentioned. She studies climate vulnerability and resilience in agriculture with a special interest in seed diversity and land access on resilience. Using qualitative and quantitative methods that include conducting interviews, evaluating survey data, and analyzing satellite imagery, she shapes her research on consultation with community organizations and shares it out with practitioner audiences in accessible formats. Really looking forward to the presentation that proves that today. Her learning extends beyond the classroom. She's in the field as a gardener and part-time farm worker and a co-organizer of the Jewish Seed Project, which explores cultural connections with seeds and seed keeping. And before graduate school, she was a communications professional at Farmstead. So we're really grateful to have you, Masha. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Abba, for the introduction and for organizing all of this. And thank you so much, Kat, also for that background on the policy side of things. Yeah, just excited to be here today. I guess I'll start by saying that, this is information that I gathered from a bunch of production farmers. And I know that there's also a lot of knowledge and experience with this topic in the room. So I'd also kind of love to draw on that today. And I kind of see myself as just like synthesizing things that I'm hearing from people, who are living and experiencing climate change every day. So, I just want to start with the basics in terms of how farmers use seeds to adapt to climate change. And I kind of assume that most people in this room are kind of on the same page around this. So seeds are important for climate resilience. I hope we can all agree. And that's because we need variety in how different crops respond to changing conditions, right? If the spinach doesn't like it, maybe the zucchini will like it, or maybe, different varieties of the zucchini will be able to handle heat better, So having variety on the field is really important, and that's important at the variety level, at the crop level, and at the field and the farm scale, and probably even higher than that. So that's the first big idea. And the second one is that as farmers are using this diversity to adapt to changing conditions, it happens very iteratively. It's a very experimental, you kind of see what works, see what doesn't work, hold on to what works in future years, in terms of what you're planting and also when you're planting. So that's just sort of the basics of how farmers are using seeds to adapt to climate change. And yeah, again, I assume that this is probably review for most folks. Yeah. So I was also curious about not just the farm level, but at the seed system level. What does it mean to have a seed system that's resilient to climate change? So I got at this by doing a bunch of interviews with production farmers in Western Washington who were all doing crop planning on their farms. And they were also all using organic practices, though not all were certified. They were about half certified, half non-certified organic, across a range of farms and income, gender, age, and race ethnicity. And yeah, this is just a map of where people were in the state. Just to talk a little bit about the climate impacts that people are feeling here. So definitely extreme heat is a really big one, and also increasingly wildfire smoke. I think another thing that people are experiencing here, which is pretty common, not just across the states, but around the world, is unpredictability, right? You don't really know if it's going to be wet. You don't know if it's going to be dry. Just the general patterns that we've been having that have been precedented for so long are now becoming disrupted. And seeds, as it turns out, are really important to be able to adapt to those conditions. So going back to seed sourcing, or going back to thinking about the seed system, I was asking farmers, again, production farmers, where are you sourcing your seeds from? And I found these different, I would say, like categories, although it's really, I guess it's more of a spectrum. Like there are people who are in between these categories, but basically you could be sourcing from community seed initiatives that are doing a lot more kind of cultural seed keeping work, or really local seed keeping work through informal networks, seed sharing, things like that. Regional seed growers. So that's the smaller regional players who are, for example, here growing almost or exclusively in the Pacific Northwest. So in the PNW, that would be folks like Uprising or Deep Harvest Seed. And then, of course, the larger seed companies like Johnny's or Territorial that are very well established. And each of these have different, I would say, characteristics. So going back to Johnny's, so they're going to be, farmers are probably sourcing most of their seeds from these kinds of companies. They're able to produce high volume seed that are very consistent. Oftentimes they're more affordable. That's really key. I think a lot of farmers were talking about, yeah, I would like to, source most of my stuff from small local seed growers, but I just don't have the money for it. But the flip side is that you don't necessarily know where the seed is grown unless you reach out to the seed rep and try to find that information. Conversely, this regional seed growers are, growing in this area, so you know that they're more adapted to this climate. There's a lot more transparency around where the seed is grown, but it might be, maybe they're only selling seed packets and it's more expensive. And then community seed initiatives, that's where people are, for example, adapting traditional crops or culturally relevant crops through their own networks. And a lot of that is like more community based, maybe more focused on seed sovereignty and, community ownership of seed. But again, it's going to be in small quantities, and this probably won't make up the bulk of your production. So just want to share a few quotes from farmers about how they're thinking about where they're sourcing their seed from. So one farmer is saying, I don't want to put a crop that is bred in Georgia here in the Pacific Northwest because I feel like I'm setting it up for a little bit of failure. So a lot of it has mostly been finance-based. And so I have to pick the crops that I really want from the region. So definitely farmers here are thinking about climate change and wanting to grow things that are adapted to this region in order to handle these really fluctuating conditions. But they feel like they can't necessarily do that for every single crop. So it becomes important to pick the crops that you want the local breeding for. So here that might be crops that, for example, are newer to the region or don't always. So for example, melon, melons are hard to grow in Western Washington because the season is short. So a farmer might prioritize growing locally bred melon that can handle this current climate, and then conversely would be also more able to handle climate change, either because of that specific variety or because of the diversity in the multiple varieties that you're getting. But then other farmers are saying, actually, sometimes I want to pick seeds that are from different environments. So this farmer is saying, and there are times when you do get a more resilient seed if it's been grown in a few environments. So I'm just going to skip down so I happen to know that the type of fennel I grow, most of the seeds grown in California. And if you want something that's really bolt tolerant, sometimes that means you need to grow something somewhere with a longer season than you have. So some people are actually saying, we need to grow seed from places that are experiencing more stressful conditions than we are, so that we can then use that seed here. So there's like different perspectives about where the seed is coming from and how that can contribute to climate resilience. And then another I think common idea is I do like to support some of the smaller local seed companies just sort of on principle. But at the end of the day, I get most of the seeds from Osborne or Johnny's or High Mowing or Territorial. I guess they're one of our larger orders just because I need them to do well on scale. So this is a pretty common idea. And it kind of loops back to climate change because, in order to be resilient, you do need to have a level of consistency. I think there's a lot of maintaining tried and trues. Like you want to maintain the seeds that work really well for you while being experimental and adaptable to change. But if everything is experimental, then it becomes hard to have some, I guess, year to year consistency. So farmers do sort of rely on these bigger companies as a lot of times the backbone of their production. And then they're being more experimental with those smaller seed growers or more community seed sourcing initiatives. So I kind of summarized how each of these different, I would say, like groups of seed sourcing. And again, it's like really a spectrum. So it's hard to, some initiatives might fit in between these different categories. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about the strengths and the limitations that each of them might have for climate adaptation based on the quotes that I just shared and also other ones. But yeah, so looking at these larger seed companies like Johnny's, having affordable and consistent performers can help reduce uncertainty. When there's already uncertainty with the climate, then having these kinds of performers can help reduce that. And also, even if something wasn't necessarily grown in your environment, maybe it was grown in a similar latitude. And then what you end up doing is because these companies are sending seeds out to different growers across the continent and maybe even across the world, you might have the same seed that's adapted to different environments. And that in turn might make it more resilient. But the flip side of it, going to the limitations, is that you just don't know, right? Like maybe that's the case, but you're not going to know that when you're ordering the seed. So you have that very low level of transparency unless you kind of go out of your way to ask about it. But, if you're growing 50 seeds or 80 different varieties, you're probably not going to have time to do that for each seed. And then also you have a little bit less autonomy over seed production, right? It's like centralized in a location that's away from where the farmers themselves are. So if there's a huge disruption, then it might be hard to access seed. Going to smaller regional seed growers, you have a lot of high transparency around where the seed was grown. That seed may be specialized to your local climate and the local challenges you're dealing with in your climate. And that can be really helpful with adaptation. But it's like a little bit more expensive, right? So maybe if you're spending a lot more money on seed, you don't have as much for other climate adaptations like season extension or irrigation. And then also, maybe there's a little bit less consistency, which would be valued in a climate where there's a lot of unpredictability. And then, okay, turning to the community seed saving component, or I guess like the kinds of community seed savers that people are getting seed from, you get a lot of autonomy and sovereignty over seed, and that can be really especially valuable in times that are unstable. Whether that's because of climate change or markets or, I don't know, trade wars, whatever. I feel like we're just living in an unstable time. So having community sovereignty over seed can be really valuable. And what we're seeing is that people are oftentimes adapting cultural seeds from different parts of the world to their local environment. So some farmers are, for example, adapting sorghum to the Pacific Northwest. And that's something that, those cultural seeds are really valuable. And you might not be getting that from a seed catalog because it's not like kind of a like kitchen staple crop in the United States. And then there's also a lot of value in just sharing knowledge about seeds and also about experiencing climate change in community. Like with the Jewish Seed Project, we're doing this kind of distributed seed grow out of a chaped melon or kishuim, and we just had a call on Monday, and we were talking about how having different growers from across the country talk to each other about the seed, and then also the challenges is really helpful in terms of learning from other people and applying those learnings to your own farm. But conversely, the limitation is that there's like these are very niche crops that probably aren't making up the backbone of your production. And oftentimes these seed initiatives are focusing on like a few crops. And so you still need to be sourcing from other people in order to, make up the bulk of your production. So that's basically a rundown of what I gathered as like the strengths and limitations in terms of from the perspective of farmers who are buying seed or using seed. And just a quote that I think when I heard this from one of my interviews, it really clicked for me. And it's that I want to spread my money around and support both companies because we need all of the things. We need the seed vault in Norway that's under the iceberg. And we need companies like High Mowing, and we need companies like Uprising. Like we need all of them, just like we need solar and wind and geothermal. Like we need all this stuff. Basically what this farmer I think was saying is that you need different things because they have different strengths and limitations. They have different roles to play in terms of making the system more resilient. So that was sort of my big takeaway from doing this work, is that different kinds of seeds, and I would say different kinds of seed production and scales of seed production have different benefits for climate adaptation. And then when we have variety in how the seed is grown and sourced, that can increase the resilience of the seed system overall. So that's basically my spiel. I just want to say that this was very much from, like I said, from the perspective of production farmers. So I'm really curious to hear how folks in this room who are seed farmers or engaged with seed directly, receive this and might share more of their strengths and limitations in terms of your own experiences with growing. So yeah, I think we'll have time in the breakout room to talk about that, right? So just to start thinking.
Thank you, Masha. Thanks so much for the presentation. And it's just nice to see it all kind of laid out together in one spot, and just really a nice framing of the conversation, I think. So yeah, thank you so much. And got some love coming through, and all these little, you're getting some emoji love.
Thanks.
And I'm gonna welcome Shelby Mandonado to come on camera and say a quick hello. And are you all right if I do a little intro of your bio, Shelby? Excellent. So I had the pleasure of talking to Shelby these past couple of months. They are a farmer, organizer, and mother with a passion for collaborative models of community building in the Southeast, deep family roots in Atlanta, Georgia, Asheville, North Carolina. Shelby is dedicated to uplifting and preserving the unique culture of the South. Currently proudly serving as the Associate Director of Membership and Programs for the Southeastern African American Farmers Network, otherwise known as SAFON, where she supports the visibility and viability of Black farms and farmers across the Southeast and Caribbean. In addition to that, Shelby, no big deal, is also stewarding Water's Edge Farmstead, which is a small intentionally managed farmstead in Candler, North Carolina, and is a founding member of the Appalachian Seed Growers Collective. Shelby is a heart-driven animist and land steward working to honor the intimate webs that hold all of us, human, fungi, plant, insect, animal, or otherwise. Believing that the only future we can guarantee is the one we mutually create, Shelby is dedicated to supporting the viability of agrarian lifeways throughout her work and personal endeavors. So welcome, Shelby.
That's it. That's the whole presentation. All right. Thanks, folks. Yeah, thank you for the sweet welcome. And as I'm sure most of us on the line, farmers, academics, people embodying organizations and institutions, we are all busybodies. So I know we all know what it's like to wear multiple hats. Yes, Masha, thank you for the framing, some of that like big picture thinking around this intersection between climate change, climate adaptation, and seed. Um, so I don't have a presentation today. I wanted to join just to do some storytelling. It feels more of my speed. My comfort zone is to do some storytelling, especially being from the South. That's what we love to do. So I want to share a bit about myself, but more importantly about my collective, our collective, I should say. So I, as Abba Uplifted, am a founding member of the Appalachian Seed Growers Collective. We are based in Western North Carolina. And so we are entering our third or fourth year. Time is shaky right now for me. I have a fresh new baby, so I'm like, what is time? I'm not sure. We're entering our third or fourth year growing seed together. And yeah, our collective came to formation around a lot of these conversations around the intersection between seed work, our role, share a baby pic. I will be happy to. Maybe we can get a baby interloper on the video here in a few minutes. Yeah, we started having conversations around the intersection of climate change, our seed work, production farming, community care, like how we can respond to all of these questions together, especially in a region like the Southeast, which has it's a complex region, like all of our regions are, but particularly when we're thinking about the intersection of climate change, climate resilience, and seed work. So I have always known, have always seen informally on farm, at a garden scale, at a family scale, at a community scale, seed keeping and seed work has always been like a really integral part of Southern lifeways. But the Southern seed industry or seed social infrastructure looks a lot different than it does in other regions. So when we started thinking about the formation of our collective, we really wanted to make sure that we could bring forward and make visible some of those lifeways, as well as advocating for the seed that we grow and the growers that we represent. So I think this won't come as a surprise to anyone on the call. Something that we are really dedicated to is the bioregional adaptation of our seed. And that for us means that we as a collective can't share or represent seeds that aren't stewarded by our growers here for at least 3 to 5 years. There was a quote that Masha shared from a grower that was like, I don't want to buy seeds from Georgia and grow them in the Pacific Northwest. And it's the same issue that we faced here in the Southeast. We have a lot of rainfall. We have a ton of humidity. We came this close to naming our collective the Humidity Seed Collective. We backed off of that. We have high pests. We have a lot of things that make growing seed in this region challenging. But that also creates a circular issue where our production farmers, even our, home scale gardeners, grow seed or grow crops that are grown from seed outside of our region. That just don't perform well for us. So having that bioregionally adapted seed to offer growers in our region is something that we hope is a meaningful and impactful offering for our region. But when we think about climate change, climate adaptation, there's more than just the like hardline technical, oh, like the humidity's high, oh, we get a lot of rainfall. There's unpredictability. All of those things are true, but there's also the like softer underbelly pieces that I think play into climate resilience for growers, particularly seed growers in a region like the Southeast. So something that feels important for us as a part of engaging seed growers, developing more seed growers in our region, and making seed work a viable life way for our region is reimagining the economics of seed production. So this was something that was very important for us as a collective, is like shifting how we think about, the economic structure of how we grow and share and sell seeds. So in a standard seed grower relationship, the farmer themselves assumes the majority, if not all of the risk when producing that seed on contract. And there's a lot of things about capital and producing things for money. That means that small scale producers, family farmers, emerging farmers, folks who are learning or wanting to develop a skill have to assume a certain level of risk. And we were interested in trying to see how much we could invert that. So we as a collective have built into our economic structure that we, outside of just selling seeds for money, a part of capital, we really value our farmers. We value the lands that we steward, and we value the labor that we can all offer. So we have built an economic structure that guarantees a minimum base payout for our seed growers each season. And that is even assuming we have like a cataclysmic crop failure like Hurricane Helene. We had the majority of a significant portion of our seed growers and our seeds, were lost in that hurricane. And we were still able to offer some sort of love honoring, some sort of, an economic incentive that honors the love and the intention and the labor that went into growing those seeds. So that for us is also a part of climate resilience. If we are consistently expecting small scale producers, family farmers, farmers who are learning and trying to develop a skill to assume all of the risk, and there is failure in farming. Farming is failure, I think. This is a lot of failing in farming, but if we can work at a collective scale to create better economic safety nets or like a soft landing place for our growers, that helps us be better able to respond to climate change as well, because we're not afraid to say, ooh, I'm not sure how this crop is going to produce. Let me just like get something that it creates an incentive to continue to try to grow new things for our region. And another one of those softer side points that I think can be sometimes overlooked in like the broader discussions around climate change that can and necessarily do need to be like really technical focused. We need, the data and the science to understand how to adapt to climate change. There's also real humanness, a real person to person orientation of our work that I think has been really critical through organizing with the collective, and something that I bring through my work. I'm primarily coming from a lens of farmer organizing. And so we are not just a group of folks who are growing seed and hoping that people buy them. We are neighbors and we're friends. We spend time with each other on each other's farms, and we know each other's children. And it's important that we spend time aligning around our values and our goals and our dreams and our fears and all of the things that make farming in uncertain times a little bit more certain. I was just thinking, I just had my brain ping around Helene, and we talk a lot about bioregional adaptation and how our collective is responding to climate change and all of the exciting work that happens with seed adaptation and, being in a region like the Southeast. And so after Helene, we had a lot of folks like reach out to the collective and they're like, how did your seeds fare through the hurricane? Well, a plant can't survive through a hurricane. Our seeds were lost, our crops were lost. But what held was our bonds, and knowing that we had each other, and knowing that we could pick up the phone and folks were there and we were able to work on rebuilding together. So I think that at the core of it, um, those are the things that I want to share about our little slice of the pie and how we are, as production farmers, as seed growers, as organizers, responding to climate shifts. And I think ultimately, getting together, threshing some seed together, sharing some meals together, and advocating for, seed work as a viable a life way that deserves dignity and, resourcing just like any other piece of the production agriculture pie, I think is what I would like to share about our collective today. I'll drop some links for folks in the chat. We are also always interested in talking with other seed collectives, other collectives in general. So happy to answer any questions and love to stay in touch and follow along with folks' work. But I appreciate the space for some storytelling this morning.